recording an interview with Lord David Alton on the 30th of March 2015 here at SMU. Lord Alton, thank you so much for being here for this interview. As you're going to lecture on education and citizenship in a few minutes, I was just wondering if you could share your thoughts about these two very critical components, one being education and two being citizenship.
Well, thank you first of all, Professor Singh, for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be at SMU, and you have a very high reputation as an educational institution and as one that prepares tomorrow's students for the contribution they'll make in the world. In a way, that's the best answer I can give to your question. But at one level, we've got to defeat ignorance and always spread educational opportunities. This is the best weapon we have in the fight in every generation against barbarism, against ill-informed forms of prejudice, against bigotry of one kind or another. So education is a key to that. It's also about personal enrichment, and it should be available to every man and woman in the world. But secondly, citizenship. We don't just educate ourselves in order to become more proficient at making money. It's important to be prosperous, and when you're prosperous you have more wealth to share with others, especially those in need. But it's not just about looking after yourself and becoming consumer addicted. It's about the contribution you can make through service leadership in the world around you, giving something back into the community. And I think preparing citizens is about preparing tomorrow's leaders for all levels of civil society. So every university, in my view, should be a modern civic university, one that uses education to look after the communities in which they are positioned, where they've been developed. There should be a combination of the town and gown that coming together. The university as a place of education, but also as a place that will provide leadership to the local community.
Right. The president of my university, Professor Arnold Di Mea, has publicly stated a few times that the current university model is so out of date, so inappropriate for the new world and redundant because it's based on 19th century industrialization, career pathways, those kinds of things. However, he said the pressure from parents and other stakeholders to continue in this model is sometimes hard to resist and hard to combat. So do you think that if this movement, education for citizenship, gains momentum, on the one hand, parents will be saying, hey, there's something new coming our way. On the other hand, there will be the diehards. What do you think is the best argument we can give in sort of taking over the idea of civics being at university level from, say, school level? So I studied civics in primary school and then Sec 1 and Sec 2, the 2 years of high school. Yeah.
I think one of the worries that people have is that civics will be just teaching people bits of the Constitution, but it will be dry as dust. And I don't see much point in that myself. I think citizenship has to be experienced, and it's about doing vocational things. I think you become much more useful, incidentally, to your potential employers in the future if you're a man or woman who has poured themselves out altruistically for others, if you've got involved in philanthropy, if you've got involved in charitable work, if you've got involved in voluntary endeavour, you become a much more useful employee in the future. At my own university in Liverpool, John Moores University, we have 26,000 students, and we offer citizenship awards as well as high academic standards. So it's not a question of doing one or the other, it's a question of doing both. I think we have to provide traditional education for those who desire a traditional education, vocational education for those who need it to go into whatever professions or workplace they're going to go to in the future. But for every student, there should be the opportunity to develop themselves as a good citizen, handing back something from the education that they have received. In a world in which people seem to be having so many problems in learning to live with each other, we see so much violence and sectarianism, prejudice, hatred, bigotry in the world around us. It's surely important to form tomorrow's citizens. And this isn't really a new idea. It's one that maybe we have to reinvent. But after all, it was Aristotle, the father of democracy, who said we are not solitary pieces in a game of checkers, because we're all part of the game. He said that aid of shame would attach to the man who refuses to play that part. So this is about a call to active citizenship because it's a duty, it's a principle of citizenship. But if you acquire rights, then you have responsibilities that go with them. And a good education, I think, will make sure that when you finish your days as a university student, you'll understand that.
Right. I mean, it's interesting you touched on Aristotle just when I was going to raise Aristotle too. But in a slightly different way. Now, as you know, Aristotle said man is nothing if not a political animal.
Yeah.
So I think it will be difficult to avoid the stereotype that most people would have about citizenship, that here's going to be politics. So do you think it's better to accept that and say yes, because politics is tied up with citizenship, or do we say no, there is in fact a fundamental distinction between politics and citizenship?
Well, I think Aristotle's idea of the polis, of the place where we all play our part, is very different from the idea of being a partisan politician.
Today,
And I can say, I suppose, as someone who served for 18 years in the British House of Commons, and also it was elected whilst I was a student to the Liverpool City Council. So I've been around politics all my life in that sense. But for me, politics has much greater and broader reach. We are all political animals, as Aristotle said, because we care, or should do, about the world around us, not just looking after ourselves. We have to care about the world around us. And if we're fortunate enough to live in countries like Singapore or in the United Kingdom, there are so many opportunities to make a difference in the world in which you live. And it's therefore being political to be involved in voluntary endeavour. It's being political to agree to become a magistrate or a local justice of the peace. It's being political to become a governor of a school, or to run a voluntary organisation of some kind, or to get involved in a campaign group. So there are many ways in which you can be involved. The most important thing is not to opt out. I think one of the big fears I have of society today is the emphasis we place, the exaggerated emphasis on narrow individualism. Do unto others before they do you. Grab whatever you can. Take as much as you can without putting anything back. That can't be right for society.
So the question then would be, just to probe a little bit further, who is going to be teaching this? Because the idea would be that the person teaching it would probably be influenced by his or her ideology, his or her personal values. So is this going to be a state intervening, drawing a state curriculum, like this is the national curriculum for citizenship? Or do you think that different stakeholders, different communities, how do you think it's going to work out practically?
I think that it's dangerous if it's attached to a narrow ideology.
Okay.
I think it has to be much broader and wider than that. And so for me, in every aspect of curriculum, there should be something to do with citizenship. Take English literature, for instance, and the subjects that I know that you love yourself. That within the literary tradition, there's so much that you can explore. You take Orwell in 1984, or you look at some of the fantasies in science fiction, and you think about the terrible worlds that can be created. So you look at these things and look at values that you adhere to, principles contained in the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, for instance, principles contained in the Commonwealth Charter, the kind of principles that most modern societies aspiring to be democracies embrace, of human rights, of the rule of law, of the championing of justice and of social equality. It seems to me that these are all things that need to be explored, but so do things like ethical judgments as well. When you're studying science, it's important that you study what the implications are of the things that you say you have a right to do as a scientist. Is it right, for instance, to destroy a human embryo? Is it right to experiment on a human being? Is it right to develop weapons that can bring about the annihilation of mankind? I mean, these are all proper, legitimate questions that should be asked. So a non-ideological approach, but one that creates curiosity in the intellect, that gets people thinking. Combined with that, I personally believe, with Tocqueville, that an impressive practical wisdom is gained simply by learning to play your part. In other words, I would put the emphasis not so much on just learning, but also on experience. We, from my university, run an award scheme into 800 schools in the northwest of England. And we give awards, which are a piece of bronze made up of the tree of life. And it shows the tree of life in itself made up of people. And it bears the words, men and women for others. And we encourage young people to get involved and engaged in the life of their community. A young man received our award recently because he'd raised £8,000 for a local hospice. I asked him why he'd done this, and he said, well, my grandmother died in the hospice, and they did so much for her, I wanted to help them by raising some money as a charity. So I said to him, this is hugely admirable, wonderful thing to have done. Just one small example, but encouraging this, we do it on our university campus, and with our staff as well. We've just had an award ceremony for the staff of the university, many of whom have given hundreds of hours of their own free time, going out doing extraordinary things, working with disabled people, setting up scout groups, going into prisons to teach people who are illiterate how to read and write. These are things that people should do out of a sense of obligation and responsibility, but out of generosity as well. And yes, you can change someone else's life, but it changes you too.
So let's take this just one step further. And that is, I think, at the local level, maybe even at the regional level, there would be less of a challenge. But once we hit the national level, I mean, the Japanese example is interesting, isn't it? Japan writing, rewriting, modifying its history textbooks at the national level, causing a lot of ire on the other side. China is so pissed off, right? Angry. There's also a feeling in the broads and non-Westerners, that the Western ideas of democracy, which in a way have been laying the foundations of what is considered good citizenship, are trying to find their way into the sensibilities of non-Western countries like Asia, Africa, Latin America. So what makes a good citizen is not universally agreed upon yet. So do you think this is somewhere maybe a United Nations can come in and come up with a new, I don't know, post, like the 21st century charter, or you know what I mean? You're talking earlier on about Article 18, which is an interesting point of departure, but different people interpret that differently. We're going to have, the moment we talk about citizenship, we're going to get all kinds of people coming up, from religious leaders to religious bigots to parents saying, I just want my child to learn how to be a good engineer.
Yes.
Can you please spare this terrible thing, because they're value laden. Once you're value laden, it becomes a real problem. What's your thinking about this?
Well, I have a son who's just about to leave school to go to university to study engineering, hopefully.
Right.
Now, one of the things I've encouraged him to do is to think how he would use his engineering gifts in an underdeveloped country. And one of his older brothers came with me to Africa 4 years ago, and we visited an area called Turkana, up in the north of Kenya, along the border with Ethiopia and Sudan. How important it was not just to become a doctor for the domestic home user, but how he could use his gifts in a faraway place as well. My daughter, who's a young lawyer, has just been in Uganda for 6 months, working with prisoners, some of whom have been condemned to death using the Ugandan death sentence.
Right.
She's helped to try and look again at some of those sentences. You use your gifts in whatever way is appropriate to you. But in every one of those cases I've given, and they're my own family cases, I would encourage them to get the highest excellence in their own education as well. So these things are not mutually exclusive. I think you have to do both together. Now, taking your other point about something that can be universally agreed, well, I'm not sure about that, because...
Hi, David.
Hello.
David Kwee, by the way, for those who are watching this, is the CEO of Training Vision Institute and a very long-term partner with the Wikimedia Center of Singapore Management University. David, thanks for coming. Lord Alton and I have just been talking about what it means to have education on the one side, citizenship, and talking about this. And now we're talking about whether, in terms of its practical implications, we could agree on a universal declaration or statement about what makes a good citizen, or what makes for good citizenship. That's where we sort of ended. So perhaps we'll let David continue on this, and then you can come in with your views as well. Pretty good? Yeah.
I think there are some things that are universally accepted, and most people would agree that there's a need to balance the idea of rights with the idea of duties and obligations and responsibilities. So there will be some parameters around which we can work, but I would be very cautious about trying to impose some monochrome, universally accepted formula, because situations vary in different parts of the world. The key issue for me, I think at the moment anyway, when you look at the horrific situation in countries like Syria or Iraq or Nigeria, where there is such communal violence, is the need for people to learn to live together, and therefore to respect one another. So respect for me would be a very important word in this equation. And if you go back to the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, which after was born out of the horrors of the Holocaust and the terrible things that happened, with 6 million people being killed in Hitler's monstrous Nazi concentration camps, where disabled people, Jews, homosexuals, gypsies, people whose faces didn't fit for political or religious reasons, were murdered indiscriminately, where there was terrible racism. When you think about that, it isn't surprising that those who fashioned that declaration, the 30 articles inside the Universal Declaration, looked at questions like the ability to respect somebody else because of their differences. This dignity of difference seems to me to be one of the great challenges, how we get people to learn to live with each other respectfully and to respect each other's differences. So yes, I think that in the home, in the school, in higher education institutions, in the workplace, in governments, that we all have a duty to promote those values. The more you get people to talk about this, surely the better. But I don't think you can impose citizenship. It has to come from within, and that will only be through example and through experience. People getting involved in the kinds of projects we've been talking about. I think when you learn to work with somebody on getting your hands dirty, as they say, on a practical project, you become friends, and that starts to change you, and then you change the world around you.
David, you've got some views about that?
I like the notion of the dignity of difference, and especially when you're dealing with issues of race, religion, and ethnicity, it either becomes a melting pot or a boiling pot. A melting pot of values, like you said, or a boiling pot of differences, contentions, and division. So you alluded to the fact that the first step is engagement. And engagement, I think you mentioned in the project. But are there other contexts besides a project that can really transcend across race, ethnicity, and religion?
Well, I think when people learn to live alongside each other respectfully, that will often be because of the leaders of their faith communities, it will be because of political leaders, it will be because of the educational communities that they're part of. So all of these things, I think, are factors that play their part. But sometimes you have to construct projects that draw people with each other. Sport, for instance, is one of those projects. Music is another. I've been talking to Professor Singh about an idea that a musician has had who came to see me recently to bring together two orchestras from the divided Korean peninsula to play music with one another. Well, you can't fire music down the barrel of a gun, so it's possible that such a project can take place. Or you think about sport, the Commonwealth Games, the Olympics are good examples of this, of countries who might not always have a great deal in common, coming together and respecting difference. The Paralympics have been able to be respected, and they seem to make a very important contribution from a sporting point of view. So these are not mutually exclusive things. I think you have to do them all.
It's very interesting because I think it makes a lot of sense that getting to work together, or maybe even just to speak together about a work that we want to do together, starts the whole process of reaching, in a sense. Unfortunately, a lot of times people from different paradigms and worldview starts with the agenda that is most important to them. And that agenda that is most important to them is the one that divides the other communities from even beginning to speak or to work for the matter. How would you suggest that education could perhaps play a role to circumvent that, or at least allow for a process to begin on a positive note rather than on a so-called polarization?
It's an interesting point, David, and I think back to my own experience with the Northern Ireland peace process. As you know, several thousand people were killed in Northern Ireland during the so-called Troubles, but the divisions in Northern Ireland go back centuries, and there have been communal hatreds there over many generations. Trying to find a way forward just through politics seemed to me to be pretty problematic, because if you came from a Republican or a Unionist position, you were completely diametrically opposed.
That's right.
And if you sat down with an agenda that said, how do we find a political solution, you get nowhere. And I was a Northern Ireland spokesman in the House of Commons, and I remember the Prime Minister, John Major, talking to me about how the Northern Ireland peace process might be devised. And we both agreed that if you had an agenda, then it was going to go nowhere. But if you could just at least stop the violence for a short time, maybe then people might start to learn to address one another, and maybe in the next generation you would see some difference coming about, because people would not want to return to the situation they'd been in previously. And the peace process in Northern Ireland, it's not perfect, but it's a good example, I think, of how you can achieve a reasonable result by not being too prescriptive from the outset, but looking for novel situations, different things to reassure, to build trust. Building trust, I think, is crucial, and that's often done through friendship and by friendship and example. Political leaders have a special responsibility here. If they use their power to simply castigate another group of people, to exaggerate difference, and to play to their own community, and not think about the wider community, if they don't protect minorities, but use minorities, whoever the minority may be, in order to use them as a scapegoat, in order to try and attract support from a majority, then this divides communities. It doesn't bring about harmony and coexistence. So I think we have to promote this at every level. Children in school, you have to have things like anti-bullying strategies. You have to protect minorities in schools. You have to create opportunities for people to share each other's culture and to learn and respect. I mean, for instance, how many children from a non-Muslim background have ever been inside a mosque? How many people from an Islamic background have ever been inside a Hindu temple or inside a church? We're fearful always of other people's backgrounds rather than trying to understand them and enjoy them. So I think there are many things you can do at different levels.
Actually, that sets me thinking very much at a much more deeper level, because a lot of times the way we behave, political leaders, religious leaders, is because of the way that we have been preconditioned and we are hardwired. So would you have a perspective on, if we really want to educate the leaders of the next generation, at what age do we need to start engaging them so that they do not become hardwired, and it's going to be very difficult to basically change their paradigm of the world?
I think we've got a real challenge because of, for instance, the pervasive spread of the internet. I'm not a Luddite. I don't believe that you can even seek to try and destroy or control the internet, but I think you have to recognize the power of the internet. And so jihadist extremists, for instance, can use it in order to attract and proselytize young people. They may be very alienated young people. Now, how do you counterbalance it? Well, you have to have inspirational teachers in their schools. You have to bring people into their schools and colleges from quite an early age. I promoted an amendment to our Education Act, which became law in Britain, that every school has a duty to promote community cohesion. Every school. And our inspectorate, the education inspectorate, have a duty to inspect every school to check that they are doing that. Now, I don't want to tell them how to do it. There are lots of obvious ways, but it's for the school to do. They've got to think around it themselves. How do they promote a genuine sense of community cohesion? How do you ensure that someone who is likely to be radicalized is drawn into the fold and shown that you can change? It's legitimate to criticize. It's legitimate for you to dislike things that the older generation have done. It's legitimate for you to say there must be better ways than this. But the way to go about that is surely through peaceful means, through democratic means, and showing them how you can change in a peaceful way, I think is very important. And I don't think we've done enough of that. Certainly in the United Kingdom, the idea that young women can be recruited by jihadist extremists to go to fight in Syria fills me with horror, not least for the girls involved. What will be the outcome for them? Why have we so failed to show what a wonderful alternative they have, living in a free society with educational opportunities, for instance? All three of the girls I've just described have been at good schools in Britain. If they were living in some jurisdictions, they wouldn't even have the right to an education because they're girls. So why have we failed to communicate this properly? So there are deep questions to be addressed here.
So much of the curriculum of a potential subject called citizenship would be pivoted around case studies, right? Specific examples and all that. But as we're running out of time,
but can I come back to your point you made before, Kirpal, about history? Because I felt, here is another subject in the curriculum. And it's always a contested question. And you gave the example of Japan. And only today I see that a public opinion poll in Japan shows that a majority of people polled would like an apology to be made by the Japanese government for their role during the Second World War. And this shows a generational shift, which is a very welcome one to my mind. I mean, I know the Korean Peninsula quite well, and I've travelled in China, and I also have met people who of a different generation who were in Singapore during the period of Japanese occupation, and knows many of the stories of the suffering that people endured. Healing history, it's true in Britain and Northern Ireland as well, especially in that context, requires a man or woman to step into another person's shoes and to see history from their point of view. So the way we teach subjects is important, and that's why I say citizenship shouldn't be in a small box and put over there for someone to teach who's got a degree in citizenship or whatever that may be. It's for every teacher to be involved in and to see how their subject might be used to promote a more wholesome view of citizenship.
But one of the awkward situations that can arise from this, just going by one example from Singapore that was brought to my attention, was that in Singapore we have something called national education. You combine theory with practice, learning journeys and all of that. And part of the practice is that there are certain things that Singapore cherishes, multiracialism, all this, and you have to do it. But somebody told me that a few teachers begin their national education lessons with the kind of following, rough statement. I don't believe in everything that I'm about to next share with you or so-called teach you or facilitate a discussion about, but since it's something I have to do, I'm going to do it. Now that already prejudices. Now if you take that away, then the teacher would say, but it's my right to tell my students, and honestly, how I personally feel about this. So what I'm saying is that we all agree that citizenship education is absolutely essential if you're going to have even any semblance of world peace or world, safe, environment and all of that. On the other hand, to make it inclusive would be to stretch the responses that we potentially might get from people who are fundamentally convinced that their monochrome view of the world is the world view that should be taught, should be espoused. Otherwise, there's going to be a great deal of difficulty. Is there any quick solution to this, or is this a very slow, baby step journey?
Well, I think they ought to be asking themselves some questions about why they went into teaching in the first place.
Right.
Because if they have such a monochrome view, such a narrow view, such a prejudiced view, and are unable to see other people's points of view, I don't think they should be teachers in the first place.
True. So the panel of interviewers and all of that. But there are large countries with monochrome views, with millions of people in them. So I think maybe we have to agree that those of us who come together and concur that this is very important, meaning we begin with mutual self-respect and we move from there. So if you don't believe and don't subscribe to that, however, there's an insidious side to it because people will fake and pretend just to get in. Remember the old Marxist thing? You get in them, you cannot do anyway, be one of them, and then work from within outwards. And I think that comes back to the example of the 3 girls.
It does, but it also comes down to ourselves.
Right.
But in the end, it was Gandhi who said that if you want to see a change in the world, you have to change yourself.
Absolutely.
And there's another story which I like, which is that if you want to change the world, then you have to change your country. If you want to change your country, you have to change your community. If you want to change your community, you have to change your family. And if you want to change your family, you have to change yourself. So the heart of the human problem is the heart. And we have to change our own hearts and the way we see other men and women. And if we just see an enemy in the other man or woman we meet, then nothing is going to change. But if we see someone who is precious, regardless of their colour, their class, their creed, their orientation, their gender, all these things are irrelevant. It's another human being, and this dignity of difference that we talked about before is, for me, the crucial thing. How you treat minorities, how you treat other people. So that should be our starting point. And if we can get agreement around that, I think then we'll see a huge change.
And maybe just to sum it up, no matter what our different business styles might be, and business practices might be, we have to be interested in good, responsible citizenship.
Absolutely.
You agree, right?
In fact, I think there's already a big divide between the business and the academia. And if the fusion of each can happen, and whereby it is not just a view of the world just to create economic sustainability, but a view of business is to be able to create societal sustainability, and therein business and society and the academia can really fuse as one, and that's where education really comes in. And it plays a role that is much bigger than just giving young people of the future a degree. I mean, I believe some of the thoughts around global citizenship as well.
I agree entirely.
Right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. This has been absolutely wonderful. A lot of challenges ahead. Thank you.
Indeed.